What is a malignant tumor? Malignant tumors have cells that grow uncontrollably and spread locally or to distant sites, and they spread to distant sites via the bloodstream or lymphatic system. This spread is called metastasis. As you know, every person has a chance of developing cancer, and there exist cancer risk factors. They are factors which increase the risk of a person getting this disease. It is important to know that most risk factors do not directly cause cancer. Some people with several risk factors can develop cancer, while a person with one risk factor could develop it. Or even a person with no obvious risk factors can get it. Doctors use absolute and relative risk to assess if a person's risk is higher or lower than that of either the general population or a certain group of people. Now, absolute risk is the chance that a person will develop a disease during a given time. This identifies how many people are at risk for a disease in the general population. For instance, the statement where 1 out of 8 women will get breast cancer in their lifetime. This describes the absolute risk for the general population of women. It cannot identify the risk for a certain person or group of people. For example, absolute risk cannot show if a group of older women has a higher risk of breast cancer than a group of younger women. And relative risk compares the risk of disease between two groups of people. It compares one group with a certain risk factor for a disease to another group's risk. For example, you can have multiple groups of women, ones that are older, ones that are younger, and ones who have had a relative that has had breast cancer. Now, besides those two, there are also general risks for cancer. And the first one will be old age. Why is older age a risk? Well, this is because our cells can get damaged over time. This damage can then build up as we age and can sometimes lead to cancer, unfortunately. People over the age of 65 have a significantly higher chance of getting cancer than younger folk, and the most common types of cancer are breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, and bowel cancer. A second malignant tumor risk would be a personal or family history of cancer. Of course, if any of your relatives, or even distant ones, has had cancer, then that increases the likelihood of you having it, since you are related to them. The next risk, which affects quite a significant majority of people, is using tobacco. Cigarettes, cigars, and pipes have at least 70 chemicals that can cause cancer, and those chemicals damage the DNA of cells. Such damaged cells have a very hard time to repair any DNA damage, and they also damage the parts of the DNA that protect us from cancer. It's primarily the buildup of DNA damage in the same cell over time that leads to cancer. Now, cigarette smoking causes cancer of the mouth and throat, esophagus, stomach, colon, rectum, pancreas, voice box, which is the larynx, trachea, bronchus, kidney, and renal pelvis, and basically all over the body. So don't smoke. The next risk factor will be obesity. Of course, being overweight doesn't mean that you'll definitely develop cancer, but it truly increases the chance. Obesity causes you to have more or bigger fat cells and in the body that don't just sit there. They send out signals to the rest of it. These signals can tell cells in your body to divide more often, which can lead to cancer. The signals released by fat cells can affect growth hormones. Too much body fat can cause levels of GH to rise, which tells cells to divide more often. This raises the chance that cancer cells will develop. The second affected area would be inflammation. When there are more fat cells in the body, immune cells go to the area, possibly to remove dead fat cells. This can lead to inflammation, which causes cells to divide more quickly. Over time, this can increase the risk of cancer. And the last affected area would be sex hormones, where after menopause, fat cells produce the hormone estrogen. This can make cells in the breast and womb divide more often, which increases the risk of cancer developing. These are the main ways scientists have identified so far about cancer development when a person is obese. Next factor would be alcohol, which, like smoking or obesity, affects a significant portion of the population. The ethanol in alcoholic drinks breaks down to acetaldehyde, known as a carcinogen. This compound damages DNA and stops our cells from repairing the damage. This can allow cancerous cells to grow, most notably in breast cancer, mouth, throat, larynx, and esophagus. Another important risk factor will be pollution and exposure to chemicals. Well-known cancerogens are asbestos, nickel, cadmium, radon, vinyl chloride, benzidine, and benzene. These carcinogens may act alone or with another one to increase your risk. It's quite possible that you can acquire these chemicals from drinking, from polluted working conditions, and from other sources. So it's best to be in a good environment, not to get these chemicals. And the final one would be exposure to radiation, including UV radiation from the sun. It is the same problem here as with tobacco. Too much UV radiation from the sun or sunbath can damage the DNA in our skin cells. And of course, DNA tells our cells how to function. And if enough DNA damage builds up over time, it can cause cells to start growing out of control, which can lead to skin cancer. So be very careful when it comes to sunbathing. A doctor understanding the risk factor of cancer that you are being exposed to can decide if it's possible for you to benefit from a mammogram or colonoscopy, a screening test at an earlier age, and more often routine screening, or as a last result, surgery or medication to lower the cancer risk.